Hello, welcome to IC Show TV. This is the latest in our panel discussions at IC 2019. Many thanks for joining us. Today's panel will be looking at 8K and 4K. So joining me today on the end there is Jason Rouzaire, independent AV consultant. In the middle is Kashaan Button from Dreamtek, and next to me is Norrell from AJA Video Systems. So welcome, gents. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So yeah, the question posed is 8K is on the horizon, but are we even 4K ready? Eric, are we?
Yes, I think we're very 4K ready. Coming from a broadcast background, we've been doing multiple link solutions for 4K since 2010, 2011. So we've already sort of proxied that into 8K, doing multiple links of 12 gig and HDMI 2.0.
But you guys are obviously ahead of the curve when it comes to all that. Is the rest of the industry still slower to catch up?
Yes and no. There have been a lot of other things and things we've dabbled in as well. Like HD-based T was a great solution for getting 4K to screens and off of screens and cameras and different things. And we've seen, we keep going forward with baseband and then IP and then baseband and IP kind of on a parallel track. And I think we're finally getting to the point where it's all going to level out at 4K, and then there's going to be a lot of 8K coming right behind that as well.
Sure. Kashaan, are we even 4K ready? Or?
Well, I have to agree, actually. I think at the acquisition, production, and kind of post-end, yeah, definitely. I think where the bottleneck is at the moment is actually the delivery, and a lot of that comes down to bandwidth, really. Getting that into the home. People may even have the display devices.
Sure.
Loads of people have got 4K screens, but you've only got maybe Netflix, Amazon Prime, a few services that are doing 4K.
Jason, are we 4K ready yet? Or are we not?
Well,
are we still some way to go?
I have some issues with regards to this race to resolution, because it's not the be-all and end-all of video reproduction for a start. Are we ready? I'd ask the question, do we really need it, and what's the application? Because currently at the moment we're not even maximizing the potential of 1080p. In the commercial space where we've got video conferencing, for example, there's a whole lot of issues surrounding attaining 4K, and if you look at the hierarchy of analyzing video reproduction quality, what's perceivable to the human eye, we're at a stage now where resolution is right down the hierarchy at about 4 or 5. Things that matter that looks perceivably better to the human eye, basing that on where we're at today, which is more or less, I think we'd all agree, I think it's pretty much standard as the baseline is 1080p currently. Now, if you look at 1080p, and if you add to 1080p the other factors that would make up an image, so HDR as well. You could also look at color subsampling, color gamut, and color integrity. Now, in the hierarchy of things, they are way up the ladder, way well and truly above resolution. You can easily see that by demonstrating a 1080p picture with HDR, wide color gamut, with a calibrated image versus a standard 4K image. It will look superior to the human eye. Everyone will look at it will say the 1080p image is a superior image. So it begs the question, why are we going to 4K when it's the least important thing currently? And then 8K.
Yeah. So
we haven't the point I'm trying to make is we haven't maximized the use of 1080p. Sure. And if you look in terms of broadcast, for example, TV broadcasts, there's still broadcasters out there broadcasting in 576i and really high compression. We haven't even got there if you look around the world at various types of broadcasts.
It's something we hear a lot in the magazine from integrators and consultants, is their clients are saying HD is good enough on a lot of occasions, which I guess I understand, because there's cost implications and things like that. It's slightly depressing that we're at Technology Magazine, we quite like to push the sort of technology forward, and there is better technology than that out there. I mean, I guess, maybe not from end users, because you're kind of one step away from them, but I mean, when you have discussions with integrators and consultants, are they saying, our clients are saying HD is enough?
Well, I don't know that it's enough, but I'm gonna very much agree with what you're saying.
Sure.
HD, we haven't reached the zenith of what we can do with it.
Yeah, right. We need to maximize that and get sort of a uniform playing field. Currently, it's so disparate.
Yeah, an example for us is we built a product that is a SDR to HDR and a frame sync and a lot of other things.
Sure.
And it can do 4K or it can do 4 channels of HD, and we've been selling a lot more of them. Arenas, commercial buildings where they have a bunch of fancy displays and they have one signal and they need to feed it out, do conversions, but yeah, 1080p, 50 or 60.
Sure.
Is,
I mean,
one
in
of
a
the
perfect
primary
world, I
applications.
mean, the jump from 4K to 8K would make sense, but we haven't addressed all the other parameters yet. So we're playing, and there's no standardization for HDR as well. We I think we need to get all of that right first, and then go to the next step. And I think that it's a very misguided approach by manufacturers. It's driven. It seems to be a lot of products I see coming out seems to be driven by the sales and marketing department rather than the engineering.
Although I think there are use cases where there are people who probably are crying out for 8K and 4K.
Sure.
There's no kind of standard that applies to consumers, prosumers, corporates.
Where I see the value of something 8K is like monster video walls, for example, where you've got a lot of content happening. Obviously, by scale, you need a higher resolution. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at tennis ball type pixels. That's a perfect usage case, but for seriously, 90% of what we're currently doing, whether it's consumer, whether it's mobile devices, I think the current approach for the resolution jump is really misguided at the moment. I think they need to sort of sit back and say, let's maximize it first before.
Well, I guess the purposes are different as well. So acquisition-wise, for instance, if you're shooting 8K for the big screen, then you want to get as much resolution and depth as possible. But for some of the purposes that you're saying, in terms of like conferencing, for instance, yeah, absolutely, I agree. And that's where what I said earlier about the bandwidth issue, that I think is the biggest obstacle for the whole pipeline to go from lens to screen. You need the.
Well, I want to speak to that point, because you look at like an iTunes 4K Dolby Vision, 36 megabits, which both isn't a lot, but that's a ton.
Yeah.
And Netflix about half of that with HDR10. That's a lot of money for a home consumer, especially on some of our infrastructure.
And the infrastructure side of things as well. I mean, eventually I can see free-to-air transmission disappearing for television broadcasts. Yeah, we'll be moving to that, but we've still got the issues of how do we handle that bandwidth? Because once you start adding all those factors that I spoke of, we're looking at some serious bandwidth that's needed.
And it's the evolution of codecs and the delivery side of things. Absolutely. Where you looked at 265, VP9,
right,
and other new codecs, VC1. There's some good stuff that will make it easier.
Yeah.
I mean, with regards to 8K, without asking you to look at a crystal ball, I mean, how far away is that a reality? I mean, are we seeing?
Well, I think the Olympics is going to help drive it on a broadcast front, as it tends to.
That all seems to be a leader, doesn't it?
These 4-year jumps that we make.
Yeah, I remember that was the case. I think it was the time around. I remember one of the Olympics. It might have been the Sydney Olympics, or was it the Atlanta Olympics?
I think
that was the first one in HD. I remember watching the Sydney Olympics. I was living in Sydney at the time, and it was like that was the thing that sort of drove sales. Because straight after the Sydney Olympics, or prior to the Sydney Olympics, the sales for digital, because we had digital TV around that time as well, increased dramatically because that was driving it, and the same's happening for in Japan with the move to 8K for the Olympics.
And that's where we've seen a lot of the new HDR stuff, pedal to the metal, a lot of the 4K and now 8K stuff,
and it looks gorgeous too. I mean, I've seen like 4K HDR on both a Dolby Vision monitor and the Sony BVM, and when you have the content there, it's absolutely gorgeous to look at. It's really impressive, but the vast majority of the population, we're never going to see that translate into regular usage for a long time yet, and yet they're making the jump to 8K.
Yeah. Kashaan, have you seen anything happening in 8K yet, or do you think it's still off from
just there? Kind of things like the London Olympics. I remember seeing some of the clips that I think the BBC and NHK had shot, and I think that's why I meant there are purposes for it. Like the same kind of applied to stereoscopic as well, where it worked for certain types of content. And I think live events or sports, but if you were, say, doing drama, maybe you don't want too much realism. And this is where I think frame rate comes into it as well, because along with 8K, I think frame rates are increasing. And personally, I don't like high frame rate.
Yeah.
I'd rather have the kind of the escapism of watching a movie at a lower frame rate.
I mean, it's a strange situation, because normally with technology, you have a standard and then something comes along and that's better than that, and we all move to that. Yeah. This is the first time I can remember where we had HD and then 4K came along, and then not soon after we had 8K, so it's sort of 2 steps from the sort of norm now. I can't remember ever you could see the next step and the next step after that, which is really odd, because it's like the temptation maybe is to take out that middle step maybe and jump to, it's odd, because we're going to get to 8K eventually. It's going to happen, isn't it? It's just a question of how long. It seems really odd.
It seems to be just a numbers game, and I think it very much seems to be more sales driven and engineering and need driven. A perfect example is mobile phones. Like, we're seeing higher than 4K resolution. And I remember reading an interview with the CEO of Huawei. He's a lifelong engineer, and he was saying at that point in time, this was a few years ago, there is absolutely no need to go beyond 1080p in a mobile device. It has no advantage to any user using a mobile phone. And he said, what happens when you move to higher resolution? You need a more powerful GPU. You need a more powerful CPU. After all of that, you're using more battery, so you need a bigger battery. So you've got an expensive device, a more expensive device that's of no advantage to you.
That's why they keep growing.
And that's why they keep growing in size, and even then, even though it was going the industry's gone against what he's saying, Huawei has had to get pulled into that, and because they actually didn't produce anything over 1080p, they had to play that numbers game because it was affecting their sales. People are comparing numbers, rather than outcomes.
Sure. I mean, it's something that's. We had this exact conversation with HD, then we had the same conversation with 4K, and I'm guessing we'll have it with 4K. But it always comes, you mentioned, it's the infrastructure, isn't it?
Yep.
It's
absolutely.
That's
very much so.
And I think politics has a part to play in it as well, when you start seeing it in many countries where ISPs are charging for the amount of data that's transferred. That's going to impact how much people use.
Like, for example, I'm limited on data per month, and then I also pay more for the 4K subscription, and so these things add up. Whereas you look at HDR, it adds basically no bandwidth. It's the same, but it's better.
Right.
So I do think there's a lot of mileage to what you were saying.
Yeah, sure.
Jason, are we all waiting for the infrastructure to catch up, like we did with HD?
I happen to be lucky because fortunately I live in Hong Kong, and when it comes to bandwidth, it's I think there's 3 places in the world. It's probably Japan, South Korea, and Hong Kong have got the highest bandwidth. So we don't have such things as contention ratios. We don't have such things as download.
Stop rubbing it in.
And so
a genuine look of disappointment in your face.
And and it's very cost effective because of how much ingress bandwidth comes in Hong Kong, and it's. Yeah, I mean, if the world has the infrastructure, it'd be great if we could all be on 8K HDR. I think it'd be a fantastic thing. And I think things that slow down, I don't see a necessity. I can't see anywhere where we can go with video that's of any benefit after that whatsoever for consumer usage.
Well, at some point, we'll have to redesign the size and shape of living rooms to accommodate viewing angles, lighting, and all these things.
We're all going to have monster theaters, except in Hong Kong. You guys can feel good about that.
Gentlemen, fantastic topic. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Right.
Thanks for joining us for this latest panel discussion. There's plenty more on their homepage. If you click through and search for panel discussions, you'll find loads. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.